Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a really interesting guest for you tonight. Eva Klein is her name. She's a psychologist. Her last formal position was as a professor of psychiatry and behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University. We're going to be talking about drinking and alcohol and some interesting attitudes and opinions that she has, particularly relative to the Surgeon General in the United States and some comments that they've made and some attitudes that people have got. Ava's got quite an interesting background. She has been a professor at the School of Business in Calgary. She's now interested in successful aging. Last year, we did a really good show on ageism, just about a year ago today, and how one can remain visible and relevant as we get older. She has a website called youbevisible.com, which addresses that topic. She began her psychological career as a clinical psychologist, and she's got graduate degrees from Stanford and Rutgers, as well as a postdoc in psychoanalytic psychotherapy from New York University. She's taught many topics over the years, but her favorites have been crucial conversations, how to have difficult conversations with people and not alienate them. This is also connected to her interest in delivering effective feedback, a topic she has talked about a fair amount. She feels it's essential to give feedback if you want to grow as a person. Dr. Eva Klein, welcome to the show.
And I see, Brian, you are not wearing a jacket.
I'm not. I apologize. I should put one on. I apologize. I'll go back and put one
I
on for the
remember
next.
we had a little discussion about that
About
last
how
time. I said it's so important for men to look important, and a jacket sort of does that in a very easy way.
it does, and I am a jacket person, but I didn't put one on this today. I apologize for that. Um, you want to talk about drinking and abstinence in general, but it's outside of your general area. How did you become interested in the topic?
Well, I just got so annoyed at all the information that was going on about uh, being abstemious. I personally love a martini and I love a glass of wine. And I felt that many of these people were very self-righteous and they were starting to make me feel guilty about drinking. Somehow it was sinful. And I didn't, so I decided I would get into it and see the research. An interesting fact, do you know even Jesus Christ turned water into wine? How sinful can it be? Um, so, uh, so I started to look into it, and I think many of the people that advocate no drinking and abstinence are really past alcoholics and addicts. And for them, I think it's wonderful advice. I think if you've been an addict and you've drunk to excess and you've hurt yourself, abstinence is the best route. But that's not true for most of us. It's never happened to me. I never have hangovers. And wine has, alcohol has certain benefits. Uh,
What benefits does alcohol have?
well, one of the benefits that alcohol has is that it's a time where it it allows for companionship, for celebration. We're talking so much about social isolation, and alcohol has the ability to bridge that gap. So it has benefits. And also, one of the interesting things about the Surgeon General, which I found rather interesting, his name is Dr. Vivek Murthy. He came out with this pronouncement
That it causes
that
cancer.
the causes cancer. Not maybe, not the research suggests, definitely. But just about 10 days before let me get this right, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine published a 200-page report that found little evidence to link cancers to drinking. And in fact, they found that it actually can improve cardiovascular health, which we've known about for quite a while. So,
How does it improve cardiovascular health?
because wine has resveratrol in it, And having some resveratrol really improves HDL, the good cholesterol in our body. And therefore, it actually improves cardiovascular health. It's found to lessen the chance of fatalities from heart disease and stroke.
So I
So,
had
you
a
know,
cardiovascular doctor that once told me that it was tannins in good red wine, that it wasn't white wine and it wasn't cheap red wine, but it was good, expensive red wine that had tannins that were good for cholesterol. Is there any truth to
right.
that?
Right. Well, it's the resveratrol that we're talking about. Oh, sorry about that. Uh, it's the tannins, it's the resveratrol that does it.
And resveratrol, is that tannins or what is resveratrol?
I'm not sure. I
Okay.
actually don't know. I don't know, but I imagine it might be the skin because the white wine doesn't have it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
Do
good
you
for
know that the
cardiovascular health.
leading,
It's good for heart disease.
this is another interesting fact. Do you know that more people die of heart disease than cancer and traffic accidents? So actually, more people die of cardiovascular disease than cancer.
And so red wine is the one of the solutions.
I wouldn't call it a solution, but it could be very helpful. It could be very helpful.
So I've got the mother of a friend of mine who used to say coffee gets me going up in the morning and wine slows me down at the end of the day.
Yeah, that
Is
makes
there
sense.
truth to that?
Well, I think one of the important things is to look at biological differences. There's been all this information about how coffee is so bad for you. And for some people, it really is. But other people, it's actually terrific. I can have an espresso before I go to sleep at night, and when my head touches the pillow, I'm out. So I'm one of these biologically lucky people for whom caffeine is, if not helpful, at least not detrimental. And look at alcohol. This is interesting. I looked this up. Do you know the Queen Mother? She died at 101. And if you knew how much she drank, it was outrageous. She drank about 10 times more than the suggested amount that women are supposed to drink. Well, she might have died at 115, but hey, it was pretty happy before that. So,
My grandmother passed away in her late 90s and she had two martinis every night. And I think they were double martinis.
yeah, well, sounds like the Queen Mother. See, so there are real biological differences. And I can see that in my friends too, who used to drink a fair amount. And now they're saying, oh, after one drink, I don't think I sleep as well. And so they've cut down. And so we have to be tuned into our bodies and the wellness factor. How does it make us feel?
I think some people think of it as part of a diet, and the sugars are something they're trying to get rid of. Other people have commented to me that it's that they feel sluggish. They may not be hung over in the morning, but they feel sluggish in the morning, and that they feel more clear-headed if they haven't drunk the night before.
It's a possibility. I must say, it is not my experience, Brian. It is definitely not my experience. And there's another thing. I have something called essential tremors, where my hand will shake a little bit, and it's not Parkinson's, but the one thing that has been proven to get rid of those tremors is a martini or a scotch. It actually works, and they have no idea why, but it definitely works.
Um, in the younger generation, and maybe this is unfair to just say in the younger generation because maybe it's every generation, but it appears that binge drinking is more prevalent. And I see almost the worshiping of getting pissed drunk and falling down drunk too often. Is that a bad trend?
Yeah. I don't, I think it's actually, I think the research and data show that young people are actually drinking a lot less than we used to drink when we were their age. There may be certain segments where binge drinking is very popular. And it's interesting. My son went to the University of Edinburgh and you drive along Edinburgh and it says no cars between 10 and 5. And I thought that was 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. No, no, it was 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. because there were all these drunk kids on the roads and we didn't want cars there. And I sometimes joke that he got a degree first in drinking and scotch and second in finance. So there was a lot
Well,
of
that was my
drinking.
experience in Edinburgh as well. I had a hotel right in that district and
Yeah,
couldn't sleep all night long for all the rowdiness that was going
I
on.
know, I know.
So is there a celebration of drinking that is concerning, or is it this celebration of non-drinking that you're concerned about, or both?
Well, I think that if you have had addiction issues, that you shouldn't drink at all. For example, President Trump does not drink at all, and that's because he had an older brother who was an alcoholic, and so he's seen the really bad effects of it. And our new Robert Kennedy, uh, the new
Care
Secretary
of
of
Health in the United States?
Yeah, he doesn't drink because he's had severe addiction problems. So for people like that, that's a great strategy. It's very hard to have moderate drinking, but most of us aren't in that category.
Is drinking better or worse than marijuana or other drugs?
Well, that is an interesting question. It's hard to know. It is really hard to know. Um, And I did look up some of the data. Certainly, neither in excess is great. And it's not great if you're driving a car. It's not great if you have important work to do. Um, it depends on quantity more than anything else. One of the things that my daughter told me is that now the new norm is California sober. Have you heard of that?
I have not. What's California sober?
California sober is where young people don't drink. They take marijuana, they take mushrooms, they take other little bits of other drugs, but they don't drink at all. Now, is that better for you? I don't know. I tried marijuana when I was a student and I was a little younger, and I hate what it does to my body. Makes me feel very lethargic. And I think people get dopey. They say stupid things. And so it's never been I suppose, a vice of mine. And you wouldn't see me here defending marijuana, though our prime minister, unfortunately, that was his greatest achievement in office, was legalizing marijuana.
Well, I never understood why that Canadian snowboarder was stripped of his gold medalist because he supposedly had a performance enhancing drug when he had traces of marijuana in his
I
bloodstream.
know it does.
Don't think
No,
marijuana is performance enhancing.
it does exactly the opposite. It
Now, it's
does.
interesting. I read recently about this new I don't know what you call it, a diet drug, Ozempic, that it takes away
Ozempic.
yeah, it takes away the desire for food, but also the desire for alcohol. So it's the same supposedly receptors in the brain that wants to get to sweetness, sugars, but also alcohol. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's true. I think they try to I think Ozempic limits your calories, and for sure alcohol has calories. And if you're ever on a diet, generally the wisdom is don't drink. Partly because it might impair your judgment about how much you should be eating, but also the fact that alcohol does have calories and they're Well, empty calories. I don't find them empty because personally, I do like them. I do like having a glass or two of wine.
So a martini or a glass of wine a day keeps your cardiovascular system in gear.
It really helps it. It
You heard
really
it from
helps it.
our clinical psychologist today, Dr. Ava Klein. Thank you so much.
Is that enough? Okay.
We're going to take a quick message break and come back in just 2 minutes with Dr. Ava Klein, talking about drinking and is it good for you or bad for you, and whether we should be listening to this U.S. Surgeon General that says it causes cancer, or whether we should be listening to Dr. Ava Klein that says a martini a day, a glass of wine a day is okay. Stay with us, M1. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. My guest tonight is Dr. Ava Klein. She is a psychologist. She's worked in psychiatry and behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University. She's a professor at the School of Business in Calgary, and she's been a psychological career as a career psychologist, and she's got graduate degrees from Stanford, Rutgers, and New York University. She's taught on numerous different topics. I had the pleasure of her speaking once to a DeGroote School of Business, McMaster Business School topic on figuring out what the next step in life was, what your next step in career was. And it was a really interesting conversation that made me and my best friend, who's passed away since then, Steve Cox, really sit down and have one of those fascinating conversations that you have every once in a while in life, where you really talk about your life. And Dr. Klein, you were the catalyst to one of the better conversations I've had with him. So thank you for that. I got to ask you, has drinking changed over time?
Well, we've had drinking that has just been outrageous, where people would drink far too much, and it of course ushered in prohibition. And then of course President Hoover got rid of prohibition during the Great Depression. But one of the interesting things that has happened over time, and that's from the 1700s to right now, 2020, is the size of wine glasses. And I'm going to do a little experiment.
Okay.
See this?
Yep. So an old wine glass, crystal,
And
beautiful.
see, this is our regular wine glass.
A big, huge wine glass.
Yeah, so I am going to pour 4 ounces of wine. And I wish I could offer you a glass after this, Ryan, but unfortunately we're on Zoom, so we're limited.
And so your point obviously is that these big glasses just don't look the same.
Well, look at this. I'm pouring 4 ounces of wine in this.
Into the smaller glass?
I can't even get it all in. Look at
Into
that.
small glasses. Okay.
See
Completely
that?
full. Yep.
Really full.
Full
Now
to the
let
brim.
me get the same amount of four, and I couldn't even get it all in.
Well, I do have to admit that I do like these big wine glasses.
I do too, but you're going to drink a lot less. And I tried this last night actually, and it actually works.
You're going to drink a lot less if you have a smaller glass. So we should all go back to smaller
Look at
glasses.
this. Look at this. This is 4 ounces,
Hardly is above the stem. Yep.
and this is less than 4 ounces.
Completely
Isn't
full to
that
the brim.
incredible? And it's interesting because I've helped people lose weight. And one of the things that I suggest, and the research bears me out, is that eating food on a smaller plate gets you to eat about 20% less. So isn't that interesting? And the same is true for wine. If you drink, it's not as pleasurable. I agree. I love these big glasses and you can sniff the wine. But you actually will feel less deprived drinking out of a little glass that is filled to the brim. Try it.
I do find that whether it's the bigger glass or whether it's just someone constantly refilling the glass, you just don't get a sense of how much that you have drunk if someone's constantly refilling that glass.
Well, that's true, but you probably drink it slower if it's all the way to the top.
Yep.
Like this is rather easy to refill, right?
Yep. No question.
And that is impossible to refill. It just doesn't work.
So my
So
mother had an answer, and that was just make sure that you drink one glass of wine, one glass of water for every glass of wine.
I do exactly the same thing. I agree with your mother. That is exactly my rule of thumb, and I never have a hangover.
To
So
your 20 the smaller plate thing, I had a doctor that once told me that you should do the champagne diet, that every portion should fit into the champagne glass, and if the portion size that you've got is the size of a champagne glass, you're eating the right portion size. Her other solution was only eat half of what's put in front of you. If you send back half, you'll be a lot better off. And so it's just portion size. And I was in the United States recently. Portions in Canada are large. Portions in the United States are massive.
they are. I always share everything with my husband. We always just divvy it up. The portion sizes are great. But another important thing with losing weight or trying to cut down is to always leave just a little bit of something on your plate. And that is, for some of us, that's very difficult. I am an immigrant from Czechoslovakia, and I was taught to clean my plate because food was expensive. So for me to leave and have that self-control to leave a little food on the plate is extremely difficult. But it gives me that sense. It sends a message to my brain, hey, I've had enough. I'm in control. I'm not eating what's in front of me. I'm eating what I really want to eat.
Dr. Klein, I got to ask you, you've also specialized in having difficult conversations with people. If someone is drinking too much, how do you have that conversation with people? Or do you?
Well, it depends. It really depends. And I'll give you a personal story. During COVID, I found myself drinking a half bottle of wine a night. And my husband kept telling me that I was drinking too much. And frankly, I didn't want to hear it. Uh, and one of the things he did that finally got my attention, he said, well, look, you can drink as much as you like. You don't have a hangover. You're not inebriated at all. But my feeling is it's really not that healthy. And when he said it in a non-judgmental way, that was extremely more powerful than him being mean and controlling to me. So one of the things when we see people drinking too much is we can let them know that they have a choice about how much they want to drink, but we're just concerned about them. We're concerned about their health. One of the other things you can do if
Don't,
somebody
don't,
is,
don't be judgmental.
don't be judgmental because we hate that. All of us hate that. That's
Yeah.
what got me so annoyed about all this non-drinking uh, movement. I mean, the World Health Organization says not zero wine, zero alcohol is the way you should go. So what happens is a sip of wine at communion, is that not allowed anymore? It's just ridiculous. And I think it annoys people who don't have that issue.
Lots of people have real difficulty with conflict. Um, other than being non-judgmental, do you have any other suggestions about how people should deal with difficult conversations and
Well, I think one of the things you can say, I don't mean to be controlling. I don't mean to be judgmental, but I am concerned about you. And this is the way I see it. make the person feel safe. You see, I think that's the crucial thing. Make the person feel safe and be respectful of them. Don't be condemning of them. And then ask them, well, how do you see it? So respect is very important. And the other very important thing is safety. Make the person feel safe rather than judged and wrong. None of us like to be wrong.
No one likes to be wrong. That's very
Right.
true.
And we don't
You've
like
had,
our self-esteem diminished.
you've had
We,
such an interesting career being a psychologist and a clinical psychologist and then teaching in business schools. Tell me, why would you why would you teach in business schools?
well, because I actually got tired of being a clinical psychologist because I sometimes felt like a well-paid babysitter. I would come out, really, I'd come out with great suggestions. And then we go over the same story again, and we go over the same story again. And so I decided that maybe I'd go into organizational psychology, corporate psychology. So I'll never forget this. I had my first client in one of these mobile tech companies, and we're chatting, and I tell him ways that I think he could improve his functioning. Come back a week later. He says, okay, Eva, so I've done all the things you said. So what's next? I said, what? You haven't heard of Freud and resistance? You mean you did everything I told you? He said, sure, it made a lot of sense. Let's move on. So I think my personality is such that I like to see people change. And a lot of working with corporate clients, they really want to change. I don't know if you've heard of Marshall Goldsmith in the United States. He's the most famous coaching
Oh,
um, uh, practitioner in the United States, Marshall Goldsmith. And he has a 95% success rate with his coaching clients. And the secret to his success is he says, I only pick people who want to change. The others I'm not interested in working with. So you have to be ready to receive the message. And I found in clinical psychology, sometimes my patients, unless you're Woody Allen, who wants to be in psychoanalysis for 20 years and makes a fortune, I found it rather frustrating. I like to work with people. We talk about things, they try it out. And finally, if it makes sense, they do it and let's move on to something else. And I don't have to be there for the rest of your life. I can get other clients.
well, we're going to have you back, Dr. Klein, to talk about that and maybe about thinking about what's next and career progressions. Thank you
Oh,
so much
yeah, I
for
was
chatting
ahead
with
of
us
my,
tonight.
yeah, I was ahead of my time there, wasn't I?
You were wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. We're
Thanks.
going to take a
Thanks.
break and come back in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody.